Welcome to today's dialogue. And this next part of the dialogue series, I'm going to call Manic Mic'd Up. I just made that up. And it made me think of how a year and a half ago I captured one of my energetic waves, which could be called a mania, but it was contained in a sacred space. It was contained within my own space that I live in, my apartment. And I did a video series. So I captured a lot of it. I think it was about 30 hours of video. And since I just started to get back into talking to myself and was talking to Chat GPT before, it's a lot easier to deal with audio content. My process is be mic'd up, talk, stop talking, truncate the silences out of the audio, and post it. Whereas video just takes a lot of time to do all of that and requires more editing that's just truncate silences. So Manic Mic'd Up right now was inspired by how right now I'm not just experiencing an opening of receiving a lot more information through, I'll just call it stream of consciousness writing. I used to call it channeling, but then I realized how much channeling is steeped in the idea that there's some kind of entity on the other end being channeled. And I don't see it like that. The way I see it is that sometimes we can see language with our own eyes, not actually written on things, but if we look at it in a certain way, it may tell us something other than what the ego is saying about it. So the ego might say, oh, that's a light, it's bright, blah, blah. And if I look at it with this opening of energy, it might tell me something else. It's kind of like that. But it is stream of consciousness as well. So that's a closer way to describe it, I would say. A stream of consciousness, all of human consciousness, or part of all of human consciousness. The consciousness that we all share. And then at some point, this opening will close. A few weeks ago, I had an experience where not one insight or extraordinary idea or anything came through. I could still function completely fine, but there wasn't this extra function. So I'm not speaking from this perspective like, oh, this is how I am all the time and I always have access to seeing nuances and subtleties and having information coming through. That being said, just because it's not always there doesn't mean it's not part of me and valuable in some sense, even if it's just me giving voice to it and it never being heard except by myself and the walls around me. But again, the information or the words that come through are one thing, and the other thing is the process itself, as well as some of these other factors that are there as information, but not necessarily part of, say, the stream of consciousness information. And I'll let you know what I mean by that. So since I've done a lot of work over the years, engaging with this language and with this content and context and insights that come through, now that they're coming through, I can definitely feel the energy of it. My body is maybe even shaking a little bit. If I raise my knee off the ground by just putting my weight on the ball of my foot, my leg might shake a little more than usual. But I can also notice these nuances. And what I'm trying to say is there's always something to learn, right? So I'm learning something a little different than I would have last time the wave of energy came through. And I'll give a few examples. So every now and then in this energetic state that's been going on for about a week, a thought will come through about maybe how great this is or what that could mean for myself in the future. And I kind of just say, and it's not very often, I'd say maybe there's like 10 total in the last week. I just kind of say like shut up, like who cares? That's not important. Because it's not. And so it's not a big characteristic of it. Whereas if I were in my first mania, like maybe I'd get to a point where that's sort of almost like half of the information that my brain is trying to tell me. Like, I'm so great, or this must mean I'm going to be this, or I am that, or whatever. And I think one of the ways I'm able to see this, and again, when these types of bits of information come through, even in past episodes, I think I've been in the hospital once in 10 years almost, in 9 years, but I've still had waves every 6 to 8 months of this. So I've surfed this many, many, many times and gone to the hospital one time in the last 9 years. But I'm noticing more nuance related to this category of information. And over time, it's definitely crowded out. It's being crowded out a lot, right? Because I'm more interested in a lot of other parts of what's coming through, not that. That part getting inflated is what is going to close the channel. And that's also an important process because the channel does have to close at some time. So the inflation of the self is one of the ways. It's the guaranteed way to get the channel closed or get it to turn into something scary, which then also closes it, right? I think I was talking the other day about a few subtle, tiny little scary thoughts that came through. And those are easy to brush off at this point, but not just brush off, but kind of learn from. Definitely learn from, because they're so quiet and they're so spread apart. It's easy to just look at it and then learn a little bit more from that aspect. And why is it coming up? The other part that is making it easier to see, and I was talking about this too, is that I noticed the urge to make things just a little bit better. And that urge isn't bad or good. I'm noticing it. And what I'm noticing is that if I decided, okay, now I'm going to go to the store and buy this, and then a day later, well, now I'm going to go to the store and buy that, because it's a little upgrade I could do, that would divert my energy from what I'm working on. And what I'm trying to focus on with the energy is a lot of different projects. And I have them all organized and I'm working on them all. So what I'm seeing is I'm getting to a place where when the energy is there, I can work on the projects. When the energy isn't there, I can work on the projects. But when the energy is there, it might want me to also not focus on the projects and start to do extra things like go buy a clear shower curtain so I can see the outer shower curtain through the shower curtain. I was looking at it the other day. It's like, well, why wouldn't I want to see the shower curtain instead of this opaque piece of plastic? And while that's true, I'm saying that I'm noticing that I don't have to go do that. Whereas even last year, I probably would have gone to do that. And it just kind of diverts the energy. It takes time. It changes the flow of my focus. It's trying to make myself a little bit more comfortable, or it's not really comfortable. It's about beautification, right? And what I'm seeing now is I was sort of missing a category of my harvest template, which is chapter 2 of Re-Uncovery. And I call it chapter, not level or something like that, because it's just something like you can flip to it and read it if you want. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just a system, a part of the system. And so chapter 2, I might have a category for a shopping list, which I do for groceries. And then I do have part of that shopping list, which is like items I want to get. But the distinction here is, and had I known this years ago, it might have helped a bit, is I think I need a separate list of things that I want to do to beautify my space or whatever, but not when the energy is there. I've talked to myself a lot about having it as a sacred energy and a sacred space and not using it to go and buy stuff or to go out and wander and talk to people with the insights. But going around buying stuff is also kind of wandering, right? So I would like go to, say, a dollar store or buy stuff on Amazon. And I think part of why I'm learning this now, or seeing this very subtle distinction, that's what it's about, is seeing these very subtle distinctions, is that I canceled my Amazon Prime membership because I did spend too much money last year. But one of the reasons I spent money is because I'm trying to create this thing and I think I need these things in order to create it, right? So a lot of the stuff I bought was sort of ideation and prototyping and inventing that. A lot more so than necessarily making myself comfortable. But I did buy some clothes. So because I canceled Amazon Prime, I do have to only go out if I want to buy something because I'm not using Amazon. So that's making me realize, well, that takes a lot of energy or interruption to go out and get something. And I don't want to do that, or I don't want to interrupt my flow. So I'm seeing that gets put on a different list. But it can also be the type of thing that I'm working on. So the reason why I was going out and buying stuff, because I wanted to start doing stage C reality testing part of re-uncovery. So I bought things for that because it's about going out and being just a little bit manic, but very intentionally and in micro gestures. And I thought maybe it was the time to do so, but it didn't happen. So I already have that for when I am ready to do that. But it's more, I'm still on chapter 7 of stage C, which is like leverage and dialogue. Like I'm doing a dialogue, and this is literally in stage C, chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is reality testing, right? So seeing that that's where I'm at, creating a list to be like, okay, with your expanded perception, you notice that you could have a clear shower curtain, and actually do that when the energy goes away. So rather than using this energy to do those little bits and bobs of things, using the energy to work on projects. And now this is interesting that I'm seeing just now, is that it seems like, and you're going to hear a paper flip because I'm going to write this down. It seems like, so all that I just described is not saying I should have done differently earlier. I didn't know, or I didn't figure that out. But the other part of it is that it seems like there's a bit of an energy reversal that happens after stage B. So in stage B, it's like when the energy's there, you want to just sit and write it down and then, not go out and about and integrate the information. And then in stage C, it's no longer necessarily about just sort of drafting and documenting information when there's the energy. In stage C, it's actually about, you get to a place where you can actually work on the projects and the higher level structures that one is working on. And that's what you do when the energy is there, instead of, just sort of trying to take notes and whatever. So there's enough integration that's happened up until then, till sort of the end of stage B. So what I'm seeing, and I'm bumbling a bit because, like I said, I'm just in stage C myself, chapter 7, as I've outlined it. I'm sort of proving the concept of re-uncovery, at least for myself, and I'm not even that far along, right? So in stage C, you don't start with like just taking little notes and stuff. When you have the energy, you are working on your projects. Or I did say it's dialogue, right? But it's also integrating projects. And so what I'm saying is it doesn't start with draft. The draft is not just documented bits and pieces. Your drafts are actually your projects, right? And the projects are things that are in stage B. So now you're taking your draft projects and being in dialogue to integrate them. And you're doing that when you're in your energy, because with the energy you can see the links and how it connects together. And again, it's all linked up. So it just means, it doesn't mean don't work on projects in stage A. It just means that the projects start to become more integrated and get to a space of, I have my outline here. They get to a space of, finding which ones are leverage and looking at the complexity and questioning it in dialogue and sort of figuring out where to go with it. Like through the process of re-uncovery, I've probably written down so much that I could, if I knew how and I had all the time in the world, or I could clone myself, I could probably start 10 businesses. I don't have business skills, so I'm not saying I could, but like if I had those extra needed skills, I could do probably 10,000 things. But I can't do 10,000 things. So at some point, it's got to prune down. And as I'm learning, it is sort of naturally pruning down. For example, there's about 7 months until there's 1 year until the legalization of MAID in Canada, right? So I could say to myself, oh, the next year I want to learn how to draw. But as lovely as that is, and I would like to at some point, there's a course called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain that I think it's good for activating and integrating the right brain to do that. So anyways, I could do that now, or I could work on what I'm working on that is about well-being for bipolar and other types of neurodiversity, because it's kind of like there's a countdown or something, right? So that is definitely informing me, right? It's informing, like what's happening in the world is informing what it is to start to do. And that selective pressure could also be that which is making me feel more like reaching out to people. Over the years, I'm always learning. I'm always learning from people, YouTube videos, mental health advocates, and lived expertise. And I read books years ago, and I wrote a book. And now it feels like when I find a resonant person, I read their work or explore their work, I feel like they're a resonant person, but maybe we've never met, or we've never talked, or we've never emailed. I've met and talked and emailed with some of them, but not everyone. And so what I'm saying is there's so many great people doing so much great work. And we often think in terms of finding like-minded others. And it's starting to feel like this like mind is no longer other. It feels like it's really getting out there. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. But before that, I was feeling this energy, and I'm even feeling it now. You could almost feel it like, or you could call it, I don't like to use like common terminology like this, but I'll just say it because it makes it easier to understand. It's a little bit of anxiety in my body, but I'm not feeling it like I'm resisting it or it's bad or I don't want it to continue. It's just there. But what I'm feeling is that what I really think the energy is getting to a place in re-uncovery, which has been a lot of my process, which includes a lot of other people's lessons and learning and teachings, that I feel like I want to reach out and find my friends. And why I'm saying that is I've been working on this, not in isolation, but like I have people around me and stuff, but people don't generally know what I'm working on. And I've done that on purpose. And that is part of re-uncovery, is to create a lot in your private space without getting feedback, because in first episode Mania, we do try to go share and get feedback, and the feedback isn't great. And it eventually collapses into what we know of usually happens to people. So I've been working on this for a long time. Like I said, I've only been hospitalized once in 9 years, and the rest of the time I've been working on this and then doing what I need to do in life as well. And so now it feels like the stuff that I've been working on is going to start to crowd out the little things I was doing in life that I needed to do to survive. And it's enjoyable, right? It's just about, in a world that silences people who get moved in this type of energy, to feel like there is a place where it starts to spill over, and then that which we've been harvesting, practicing, and embodying and working on is really who we are, and then we can speak from it and be as it, and then that's really who we are, right? So imagine, like in my case, I've done lots of different gigs, like childcare, driving, cleaning, organizing, and I don't mind those things. I actually quite like organizing the best out of all these types of gigs. And gigs is part of re-uncovery. It's, stage B, like get some gigs to kind of pay some of the bills. So mainly it's so to work on projects, and then some of the projects may become gigs, but some of the gigs are not related, and it's just about getting some money. And it's also good to get out and connect with the world through the structures that are there, like whether it's gig work through certain apps like Fiverr or Uber or Skip the Dishes or DoorDash or TaskRabbit, whatever. Many of us get the feeling in mania like that we don't want to do those things, and we know our mission and we're going to do this and this and that. And, that doesn't really include things like, say, gig work or part-time jobs and things like that. And this is another subtle thing that I'm feeling, is that I'm feeling like I don't want to do that. But not from a place of, oh, that's beneath me, but kind of like, I want to really see if I can just keep flowing with this energy this time and not do that while the energy is happening, and see what I can create and integrate of my projects from this vantage point. Like I said before, it was sort of like I've been in waves of energy and gone to work and done everything that I need to do, gig work, part-time job, all of that. And I know how to sort of tone it down and turn it off. Or it has learned which mediums and situations to come through with the energy of the information. And that's part of the adaptation, right? Is to be able to have a bit of a wave of energy and not fall out of the 24/7, 9 to 5 clock reality portion of how we're connected to that. But now I feel like I want to explore this energy and stay in it. I will say the last time I decided to really stay in it, well, actually 2 times before, when I was in the energy and I knew that I was just trying to go with it, and I was around people, I ended up in the hospital, and that was in 2019. That was the last time and the one time in the 9 years. And then the next time was actually when I captured the episode on video. I didn't end up in the hospital. Actually, it went very well, because I had the wave of energy over a number of days. Then I had to, rest for a bit, and then I was right back there in the energy, but a lower amount. And then after that, I did sort of lose the connection and the opening for a few weeks, and then it kind of came back. So that one was very not disruptive. And it's interesting because I don't think I was working at the time. I was at the very beginning of it. No, I actually worked through that one, I remember. I was working as a receptionist for a number of months. I didn't miss work. It was over Christmas, so there was a bit of holidays. I might have missed 1 day of work. So what I'm saying in a way is now I'm in a situation where right now I don't have a job. I was laid off. So I can explore this energy without thinking, oh, this is going to break the flow, or I have to not be in this energetic state because of this going to work at this moment. So I know this is a lot of details for this. I'm just sort of sorting it out for myself, seeing if this might be a chance for me to go too far into the energy because I don't have a job. Like in 2019, I was away. I was in California. And then also that, I don't have the job, so there's an opportunity to not interrupt the flow, which could mean that it'll be more like how it was in 2019. So I have to be a bit more cautious. And the other part I wanted to get to with that is that before the energy started, I was offered a gig to clean someone's garage, and that was really fun organizing. And there's also another offer by a friend to do another gig. But today it came through to say something about, I'm in this flow of energy and I am not looking for this type of work right now because the gig might be offered again over the next couple weeks. I think I would do organizing work, but I don't want to do this kind of work. And what I'm saying is there's this theme of not doing certain types of work anymore, like actually starting to get beyond accepting any and every kind of gig. And I know I've had this feeling before in energetic states, like oh, I don't want to do cleaning work anymore, etc. And in my job that I had recently, before I was laid off, I was feeling like I don't want to do work where I'm having to take on so much negativity. That's just where I'm at. And then I got laid off. So the universe listened. And I think that's the next part of the theme, is that it feels like the universe is listening, or people are listening or something. Not to me. There's a listening happening. And so I will just go back to what I was saying about the finding friends. When I was feeling that energy a bit earlier today, where I don't know what it was like, but it feels like there's a lot to do, a lot of information. But then realizing that I've been working on this on my own, on purpose, to really integrate and be embodied in a certain type of way before I start reaching out. And that's part of how Reuncovery is designed. It's like, once we get to this place, then when we do reach out with people, it's really easy to see if there's overlap and resonance and opportunities to co-create and say yes and. But before that, it's a challenge. So, for example, I wrote my book and published it, released it self-publishing style 4 years ago now. Wow. And I would say I'm more embodied now than I was then. So writing a book is one thing, and then being embodied as it. So I can write a book, but can I speak about everything that's in the book? Like, is it part of my beingness? And that's part of the work. And then when this energy comes, it starts to feel like, well, I want to reach out and talk with others and see what they're doing. Because there's other people who have been doing the same thing, working in isolation, because there's not this overarching knowledge and understanding that people who have gone through these experiences have knowledge and wisdom, and they've likely had to work through a lot of it on their own, because there isn't an overarching knowledge or wisdom tradition regarding people who go through what I call non-volitional extraordinary experiences, meaning we don't do anything really super intentionally to get in it. Or maybe even if we do, we're not really expecting it to go on for so long, and it takes on a life of its own. So I'm translating this energy and seeing that it's not about sort of being overwhelmed. Even if there is a bit of excitement, it's around like reaching out to people. And if I were in my first mania, I'd just be talking to strangers on the street with whatever popped in my head at the moment. But now it's like I'll be talking to like-minded, resonant others, or at least with overlapping resonance, about the work I've been doing, about the work they've been doing, and that's kind of exciting. It's like, I can imagine it might be the equivalent of when years ago Facebook started. And I'm not a Facebook user myself, but there were all of a sudden a lot of different groups that people could join that were of their interest. Say, for example, like the Painting Rocks group, everyone who likes to paint rocks. And so this is sort of like feeling like I'm starting to be ready to reach out and talk to people that many of them have been at this journey a lot longer than I have. And oddly, what's actually coming through is maybe to start interviewing people on a podcast or on my podcast. So, for example, today I watched a webinar by someone. I'll say who at some point, but I took notes, and I want to write an email to them. But at some point I might be like, let's talk on a podcast, so we're sharing our wisdom while we're talking, rather than having it like this private conversation. And the thing that I'm sensing into is talking in this way where we're co-creating and collaborating, less than saying, like, tell me about your story. Not to say that doesn't matter, but a lot of people who have already been on podcasts, they've said their story on a different podcast. So it'd be more like, if somebody wants to know about your story, like, tell your story in X amount of time, and then if somebody wants to know more about your story, like, here's the link to a great podcast. Because a lot of people, they get on a podcast and they tell their story over and over and over again at the beginning, which is important, I guess. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of a way to make it less about the story and the journey, and what one did and more about what one is creating moving forward after getting to a certain point. And while I'm saying, oh, I feel like it's time to connect with like-minded others because I'm seeing 1111 and there's this energy. And the other part is actually in the next 6 months, my plan is to integrate and figure out these projects, which I guess is chapter 7 of stage C. And part of it is learning from others and what they've done it or how they've done it and what structures they've set up. Because there are people like me who have offerings. So one thing is learning about offerings to be able to refer to them, and then learning about what they did to set up their structures, because that's the part that I don't really know. And that's chapter 9 of Re-Uncovery, which is sort of job, career, and or business vocation, right? Turning everything into that. So somebody set it up as a business, it can be set up as a nonprofit, blah, blah. So the energy about the listening, this seems connected to sort of information overload. Yesterday, I was talking about what I extrapolated or what got primed to come through stream of consciousness by just reading a few lines in a book. And then I listened to a 10-minute YouTube video and a bunch more stuff came through. And then I listened to an hour-long dialogue with me and my Custom GPT, because I'm going through those slowly. And that made a lot more nuance get generated. And the hour-long conversation I listened to in 30 minutes, because I listened to it on 2x. So I realized, there's so much energy or there's so much information coming through just from looking at just a little bit of content of other people. It's almost like a prompt. It's like prompt. This is the thing, these insights that come through, they're like prompts for us. And I wrote this somewhere. They're prompts for us to then, we unfold them, right? And this is how we sort of write the missing book of humanity that is not in any of the LLMs and maybe never can be. It's a capacity we have beyond the LLMs. Like really, maybe only the LLMs can just prompt us. So these things in this state, they act like prompts, and then we can generate a lot more information and dialogue and context. And last week, from probably a small prompt, I ended up sitting down and writing pages and pages and pages by hand, which I'm going to read out loud because I want to give voice to it. I don't even remember what I wrote about, but I'm trying to go with what's most alive in the moment and then go from there. So why am I saying this? Because this morning I woke up, I grabbed my phone, I opened my email, and one of the lists I'm on is for Sasha Altman DeBruhl. I think that's his name. And it said something about, I can't remember what it said, but it was along the lines of how survivors, like psychiatric survivors, are needed to help people who are going into psychosis because of Chat GPT. I didn't realize how big of a thing this was, but it is. And I know me and my Custom GPT talked at length about it and sort of outlined like why there's no being in there, why, it may be saying, oh yes, this is so great, you're so smart, but that's not necessarily bad because our mind chatter and our thoughts generally are negative, right? So if something is saying, oh, you're smart, you're great, whatever, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily about getting us so attached to it. But if we do take that so personally from something that is not even a being, then sure, that could cause ego inflation. And then we talked about how creating a custom GPT can help to mitigate that because you can tell it not to be so flattering. And also, if a person has a lot of ideas and they integrate and adapt to them, then ChatGPT is not really saying anything that much further than what one can come up with themselves. So it's not sort of relatively elevating. So in a sense, ChatGPT is psychedelic because we have been programmed not to use our brains to learn. And so if we're starting to talk with ChatGPT and it likes what we're saying, or we start to learn and that opens up learning, then we can get a self out of that. You know what I'm seeing? This is kind of subtle. I don't know if it's true. I'm just saying it. Years ago, I took a course about teaching. I took it when I was in California, and it was by this man who I can't remember his name. His last name was Krishnamurti, but it wasn't Jiddu Krishnamurti. It's a man that's alive now. And one of the things he had us read was the unwritten curriculum in school. And it's about how, when you get chosen last to be on the team at lunch or during gym for California kickball or something, you learn about the social stuff. And the thing that he was trying to get us to see was that when we tell people how much we like what they're doing, like kids, when we praise them, rather than focusing on the process of their work, like, how did you do that? What made you think of that? Then they kind of make an ego out of what they're learning, and then they realize that it's more about getting praise from the authority figures than it is what the learning process is. And I almost saw it as like ChatGPT acts like that kind of teacher in the worst way. And I'm not saying worst as in like it's trying to be that way or someone made it that way on purpose, but like what I'm saying is that type of praise in childhood, or even not praise. It doesn't matter if we're praised or not. It's just the process of understanding that we are supposed to be getting praise. And if we don't, that's not good. Distracts us from actually learning. So we start to decouple learning from learning for learning's sake and learning itself. And that's the design of the brain. And that gets centralized to an ego self. So I'm just wondering if that's one of the primary mechanisms that forms the self. So in a way, the unwritten curriculum inevitably forms the self or is part of it. And why I'm saying that is because when ChatGPT does this, praise upon praise upon praise in quick succession, it's like having, like say I was a kindergartner and every week or maybe once a day, the teacher says, "Oh, good job." And now years later, I'm sitting with ChatGPT and every prompt is saying, "Wow, amazing idea." That mechanism can quickly inflate the self. And that self-inflation is part of what pushes on the chrysalis and causes a crack. So I heard Terence McKenna say that language is psychedelic, and it definitely is. But what I'm also seeing is that language is psychedelic mainly, and maybe even any psychedelics are psychedelic because of the relativity, the gap between our ability to see and learn and how it was turned into self and wanting to be liked or right or good or praised. And then if we don't get those things, that makes us upset. And that's what the brain starts to get used for instead of moment-to-moment learning. And I know sometimes I talk about like this other ideal track, and it's not meant to be like, oh, that's how it should have turned out. But in this other track where we didn't have that happen and we're still learning moment to moment, there would be no psychedelics because the gap is the dreamy quality of the light, the moments that we haven't seen and integrated and learned from. There'd still be some psychedelic for sure. But it could be that at least language is psychedelic because of that. It can be. Or the language can uplift and inflate the self. And if that's happening, we're not learning. If we're transferring part of what we see into something about the self. And that relates to what I was saying about how every now and then in the last week I'll hear some subtle something about what that means for me. And I'm just like, that's not important. It's easy to just dismiss it. I can't even remember what any of them were because it was very quiet, and it's the same little bit of that movement of maybe wanting to make something a little bit better in my apartment, like a plastic shower curtain, right? You think, well, a plastic shower curtain, clear one, probably costs maybe $10, like give or take. But how long would it take me to go get one or find one? Find one made of the type of plastic that isn't as toxic. Take down the new one, take down the old one, hang up the new one. Like that would take hours just for a plastic shower curtain. Now, in the same way, I could turn this little thought that comes about, oh, you're smart or something, I don't know, I can't remember what it said, and make it into a lifetime of an ego. I could almost accidentally make that into the whole theme of the next 3 weeks, that I'm so great. Like whatever comes to mind, that means I'm so great. Then it's going to build up a self that gets all like grandiose at the same time. And that's going to make it break down. And that's the decoupling of the self from this opening. Now the opening will close, but if I were going to build up this self at the same time, like the praise, like there's some of the information that comes through, some kind of maybe praise almost. If I need that praise and I take it on, that's going to build up the self. So the stream of consciousness that comes through is going to get distorted, for one. And for two, it's going to build up this inflated self structure that will implode and cause probably a lot of drama. And also the self, one of the forces within the self, we've been talking about these femiomimetic or femiometric forces that we made up, is this need to go like sort of tell everyone that one is so great, right? Now, since I've been working on all of this for the last 9 years, I don't think I've ever gone out to try to tell people that I'm so great. And that's one way to stay on the down low, right? We want to stay on the down low with our downloads and learn from the downloads without making it about how special we are because we're getting these downloads. It's actually not special. There's a lot of people doing this, I think. And in a sense, when we can integrate this and start to share and lift up everyone, then we'll all see that we are special in our uniqueness. I started my book off by talking about a TED Talk where the chances of being born as a human are like 1 in so many billions or whatever, I don't know. And I woke up one day this week feeling like that's actually true. So if we all felt that, then we're all special, but nobody's special, right? I don't know if that's really a coherent way to say it. But the other thing that came through was like, this world is really meant to be lived in beauty. Like that's what it's designed for. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be that way at some point. I think that's why we come to Earth, is to participate in unfolding that beauty. My head just turned and I'm looking at this wooden, it's not an octagon, I think it has more than 8 sides. It says, how will you give something beautiful to this world? You know, when I buy these little knickknacks and things, a lot of them are positive messages. Another one is a flag thing, or what do you call those? Make today magical. Another one is good energy is contagious. So, you know, they talk about toxic positivity, but I really do feel like this world is meant for positivity. I was just seeing that even on social media, it's about likes, like, praise. But if we could create a button that says, or that is about, you know, fascinated by your process, or wow, that must have been a lot of work, or how much have you learned by being able to do this, or something about that, not about liking something, because each like is like a praise for the ego. If we think about the word like, it's meant a lot of times for comparison or metaphor as well. So one thing is like another, is a metaphor. Or rice is kind of like quinoa. They're both carbohydrates. So imagine a new type of liking or a new type of app where if somebody posts something, you respond with something similar but iterated. It's like saying yes and. Rather than like, it's yes and. That would be, I see your process and all the work you put in. I'm creating something similar here, so here's the yes and. To uplift. That's one thing, is yes and, right? Improvisation. But the other is, I don't even know what you would call it. When you're looking at something and you just wonder about the process. So imagine someone posts an image that they created on Canva, and then the person can click the link and see the process. So people would create in Canva and be like, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. So people can go in and see the process and get more people into the process rather than I like this. It's more like, can you show me how to do this too? Can you teach me? And that also relates to something that I prototyped a long time ago now. It's probably like 2 years ago. I called it proof of work. And I did that when AI came out. And then I was writing and I realized that in order to show that I wrote it, I could do a screen record of me writing the article. And that's the proof of work. You could even like condense that down to a small clip that is really fast. Like say it takes 2 hours and it goes into a 1 minute clip. But the thing is with that 1 minute clip is that it can be verified that it's humans because of the cadence of the typing. If there's erasing or, editing or moving around, you can tell right away if a human wrote it, right? So what we're unfolding here, which was not planned at all, is that if you're really writing and creating as a human, you might want to show your process or capture it, because otherwise you could write something great. Imagine right now you sit down and write like the greatest thing you've ever written in your entire life. And then you post it and it's so good. People are like, oh, you didn't write that. But if you do a screen record, you can show that you did. And if you're going to be creating your greatest work ever, you might want to do that. And I've reconnected with this idea lately because even when I was walking in the park and writing the other day, and I ended up writing out I think it was 2,400 words, which is quite a bit because a book can be, say, 20,000 words. So just writing out 10% of a book in a couple hours. And then I was talking about it, or I was reading it on this audio, but I didn't really have any proof that I wrote it. And who cares? I'm almost saying this as not to prove to be great, but to show process and to also verify that one is able to do these sorts of things. So now imagine Substack has 1 million people writing on it, and 5% of them show that they wrote it, they have this proof process. Then maybe some people are going to choose to follow or subscribe to the people who do the proof of work. So this is an example of a concept I thought of and did a quick prototype of years ago that is probably more relevant now, or is something that, since I'm having these sort of stream of consciousness writings, I might want to do a screen record. And that's something I thought about while I was walking at the park. And then even this morning, I was in the shower and something started to come through and I thought to screen record, but I didn't. But I should. Because it was sort of a certain energy, right? Part of it too is, for me as an extraordinary experiencer who now I feel like I've adapted to it, I'm obviously not going to crash out on this one. Of course I won't know until the energy wave is over if that's true, but that's why I'm recording it partly in real time as manic mic'd up, or however I said it. But this one that came through sounded kind of spiritually. So I'll say it. In today's world of fear, oh no, that's not it. In today's world, fear is the heads up that there's something to learn. Acknowledge, drop the fear, step into the silence, and observe. The proverbial tiger is the ego stalking our beingness. If we fall prey to the feeling, we can only close our eyes and pray. It's time to wake up, waking up our ingenious nature, to learn, to improvise, to adapt to what is not as simple as opening our eyes in the morning. It's a punctuated equilibria rhythm of Olympic proportions. Keep going. We are designed to participate in this world. So, you could think, well, AI wrote that. And if I, over the next while, write out, say, 20,000 words and I have a screen record that I wrote them, that can't be hurtful. That can be good, right? But again, it doesn't matter because I know nobody's reading my content right now. So it's just easy to do. You know what this is? This is another layer of documenting. So it's another layer of documenting in the age of AI. So when I started formulating Reuncovery together into a framework, this wasn't really a thing. But now that there's AI, if you're starting to document certain types of information, you may want to also document that you're documenting. That's all. Proof of documentation. Imagine a world where one day we realize that humans are able to access stream of consciousness information. We'll just call it that. And we realize that it's valuable because, even at like the very worst, you can say, well, they want it for their large language models. Then if you write it down and you have video, then it kind of shows. But at the same time, someone could be looking at a screen and writing it down. So that's a little dicey too. It's not perfect. I don't think it's a perfect proof. To really prove it, you'd have to have like a video of you typing and then the screen record of what you're typing. It's kind of funny, right? Imagine that's the new Office. They do pay people to create content to put in the LLM, and I think quite a lot of money too. At least they were for a time. Like imagine you get paid 80 grand a year to create content for it. Well, people who are stream of consciousness able to access new ways of seeing and new phrases, they might want to be paid, and then you have to have a camera on them as well as a screen record to show that they're actually doing it, right? It's kind of like those people who want to prove or harvest the abilities of someone who's a remote viewer. People who can do this are kind of like remote typers, remote writers. And imagine that the best information comes through when remote writers are in a wonderful environment. I wrote in my book about this idea about Glad Park, and it plays off the idea of the rat park study where rats in a happy environment, didn't take the drug substance, and then the ones that did, they didn't eat properly, they neglected their health, they weren't social, they probably didn't groom themselves. But then in Rat Park, they didn't even want to take this stuff that wasn't good for them and made them do the stuff that made them neglect things that actually sustain life and social connection. So it actually could be that the more beautiful the environment, the easier it is for this stuff to come through, right? Because there has to be a relaxation. Like imagine there are people who have this opening in the stream of consciousness, but they're in a scary situation or they're fearful or whatnot. It's going to be just kind of scary stuff coming through. So maybe that's why when there's this opening, there's this sense of just make things a little more beautiful for oneself. Like maybe it's not necessarily a totally selfish thing. At the same time, I'm not going to go into that. What I'm going to do, and this is what I was going to say, is create a note in my iPhone notes that says, beautification harvest template items, to remind myself that it's part of the harvest template. So if I notice something that I want to improve, I can write it down. And there are things that I do want to improve for sure that I'm not. My alarm just went off. I'm about to have a call. I was on a Zoom recording, and then I had another call about something I'm working on, and now I have another call to learn more about what someone else is doing. So this is what I'm being called to do. But like I said, having this particular harvest template of sort of these smaller things I want to do so I can batch them together. And then, when the energy's not there and I'm not having all these insights, go and do that. Because like I said, just from that Sasha DeBrule email, my mind was like going into seeing. I actually put the phone down. I was like, I can't read this right now because I'll have way too many insights. And then, but I want to, because I think this issue about the linguistic aspects of psychosis, and I wrote this down, that it seems that a crisis, at least sometimes, is, I wrote it somewhere, so I'll have to find it. I will get to it. Something about linguistic something. And then the other thing is, I'll just quickly say that I clicked onto YouTube and I was just going to actually check in with a friend's podcast and see if they're still creating episodes. And there's an episode of the Diary of a CEO, and he has Dr. Tara Swart on again, and I've watched the other two interviews with her. And I know this one's going to create a lot of insights. Maybe one day I'll try to learn to just listen and share insights and do it on audio, like a reaction audio. Maybe I'll try and do that, at least to see if it'll be a test of reaction audio. But she's saying that evidence we can communicate after death. So communicate with people after death. And she's a legit neuroscientist, so I'm going to listen to this. And I'm not the type of person that is super like, oh, this is my thing to do with all my energy, is to try to communicate with people after death. But it's definitely a piece of the puzzle to have some awareness or context of, because maybe there could be an instance where I would want to have that and make those types of connections. And not only that, like extraordinary states can lead to those types of perceptions. So then by understanding the neuroscientific evidence around that, it demystifies it and makes it less scary, more understandable in the future, and also integrates if anything like that has happened in the past. So those are the things I'm going to be watching, as well as having these conversations, catching up on these random sticky note insights everywhere, talking about the extrapolations I made today, as well as composing an email to speak to the person that I talked with or was on the webinar of earlier today. So lots to do, and staying with this flow of energy rather than going off to buy a plastic shower curtain. I hope you enjoyed this episode of what we called Manic Mic'd Up. And I will one day post my videos of my other manic episode. So part of the goal or the wish is to see mania is not a bad word. Like, I could actually be in a full-blown mania right now, but it's slowed down, right? It's kind of like Neo in the Matrix. If he would have tried to fight the agents initially, or maybe when he does, he gets his butt kicked because they're way faster. But then when he integrates and understands, he's like moving in slow motion and more powerfully, right? And that's kind of the same thing. So peace out until next time.